everyone, this is Kelly from The Truth in Story, and this is going to be a video showing how I ended up trimming my Goliath tarot, which I absolutely love how it turned out. And I will say this is probably not a easy deck to trim, and I'll point out some of the reasons why and how I ended up approaching it to make sure they all ended up to be relatively the same size, with some variation in size, which is not something that bothers me. If the sides aren't perfect, it just ends up feeling very organic, which is a lovely thing for me. But I wanted to say, so I'm going to get into that. This is kind of backward. We're moving backwards in time for a minute because I wanted to start out the video by saying I know that a lot of people find that trimming borders off decks or edging decks or doing one or the other or both tends to rile some people up, and some people find it to be disrespectful I'm not sure. Some people get really riled up, and I think for most part the people that get riled up probably think that it is something that's disrespectful to the deck creator, and that's something I very much disagree with. Because the reason that I trimmed especially this particular deck, is because I absolutely love the deck. I've been using it for readings for myself, and I love the deck. And yet it is a little large for my hand. It was a little bit large for my hand, even to comfortably overhand. Now I can comfortably overhand shuffle this deck. It's still a little difficult to normal rifle shuffle, which again some people find to be disrespectful as well, but I can actually do it if I wanted to, and then of course you can always, if a deck is large, do the corners and do it that way. But I will say that now that this is trimmed, I can quite comfortably, just like with a large oracle deck, overhand shuffle, and that's probably how I will do. So I know I'm thunking around, but I've been hunching over, trimming all of these cards, and corner rounding all the cards, and my hands are a little tired. It makes it more comfortable for me to use. And so that was really, on this particular deck, I actually liked the borders. And so the only reason is just to make it more something that I can handle better. And one of the things that I love about trimming a deck and edging a deck is that I actually sat with each one of these images 3 times. While I cut all of actually 4 times. I went through and cut all 3 sides. Then I took each image onto my slider and cut the bottom separately. So that was a whole nother pass, sitting and looking at the images. Then I went through and trimmed all 4 corners, corner rounded them. That was the 3rd pass. And then I took a marker and went around it and made the black edges, being a 4th pass. So I have spent the evening going through every single image of this deck, sitting and looking at it while I'm trimming it, cutting it, doing whatever it is I'm doing with it 4 times with each single image. By the time that I get done with that process, I feel really connected with the deck that I'm working with. And it's meditative. It sinks me into the images of the cards. We get to know each other really well. And it's a beautiful, in my opinion, process. So, for those who may think that it was a disrespectful act to trim the deck edges off this deck, I would say that all comes down to your intentions. If you come to a modification of a deck with a negative spirit, with the intention of defacing or doing something disrespectful, then that's what you're doing to it, right? If you're coming to a deck out of respect and out of a desire to use it, and for whatever you do, but out of respect for the artist and out of a respect for the work that they've recreated, then there's nothing disrespectful about modifying a deck. Okay, I am in the process of trimming my Goliath tarot deck. Now, I have 2 decks that I have trimmed not based on aesthetics, but based off of manageability. And one is the Japperdia Tarot. I actually liked the borders on it, but it hurt my hands to shuffle it. And then this one it's very hard for my hands, and I do have what I consider to be long fingers for a woman. Let me turn my phone off. And I find it very hard to shuffle, and I absolutely love this deck. I've been working with this deck for myself, and I'm in love with the deck, and so I want to make it manageable for my hands. So I've had to approach this because there's differing borders, so to speak. And the way that I have approached this was to trim the side, the top, and the side, leaving the bottom intact. And leaving any extra bar, I should have left one like this. So for example, this image has a black bar along the top. Some of them have a white bar. I've left that bar so that the image, everything would be the same size. So if this is just the majors. So you'll see that there are a couple that have black tops or white tops. And I'm okay with that. It just gives a wonderful... I actually really like the borders on this deck. So this is one of those decks that I think looks stunning with the borders, but I need to be able to use it easily because I love the deck. So I am then going to corner round it, of course, but I wanted to get the minors done first to make sure I didn't have to do any other kind of trimming. And then I will corner round it small, like this is a small corner. So I'll do a small corner on it and then black the edges. So what I did is I cut the 3 sides, put it that with scissors. Then I put it into this. And cut them all to 5.5 inches, which took off some of the bottom, and instead of having a wide bottom border, because some of them have small borders with a white on the bottom, some of them have all black borders with a wider than empty spot, and so that is what evened them all out to 5.5 inches. So now the aces are going to be a little bit tricky, but I believe I'm just going to cut all of the 4 edges off and then trim it to 5.5 inches, and that should take care of that situation. So I will come back. I know when I start posting image of this, people are going to ask how I did it, and so I wanted to make sure I documented it so I could explain it. So I'll be back after I do some more. Okay, I'm back. I have done the minor arcana the same way. I cut the 3 sides with scissors, and then I trimmed it all at 5.5 inches with my slider off the bottom. Now the only other thing that I could do here is there are a couple that have borders on the top, just thin borders. But, so I could turn it around and cut another 1/4 of an inch off. But I don't think that it's going to bother me. And there are a couple cards that it will cut into parts of images that I like, or else get it really close to, the one is the 9 of Swords. This one, you know, it would definitely cut into the hilts of the swords. So I'm going to leave it alone for right now, because you can always cut more. You can't put it back on once you cut it. Again, I did these separately by cutting all around them and then trimming a little bit off the bottom to make sure it was 5.5 inches tall. These I had to watch because there is a big black part up here, so I used another card that was cut to as a stencil for these 2, as well as this one that was totally black. I actually put a card onto it and used a white gel pen to give myself some guiding lines to be able to cut that evenly. But other than that, the rest of them were you know, easy to cut. Now, if you have an issue with, you know, your edges and things not being perfectly straight, this may not be a smart option for you. I actually quite like that. It gives a nice organic feel. I can already tell that it's easier to overhand shuffle by far. And the way that I did it kept the backs perfectly centered, I think. Pretty much perfectly centered. Good enough for me. I love the backs on this deck, so I definitely didn't want to throw that off because I really like how the backs look. So, I don't think there's any reason for me to keep these. Before I'm going to, obviously I still have to cut the edges. So this is still a hefty deck. You know what I'm saying? This is still a meaty deck. But I can certainly at least do that where I couldn't do it at all before. You can still obviously do by the corners if you want as well. And it's certainly just that little bit can really help to, let me get a light colored card. Here's some of the extra cards. So this is what's been taken off. So you would think, you know, that's really not all that much, right? But it does make a difference in hand. So, you know, certainly I can hand shuffle this, and that may be what I primarily do with this deck. Because I see myself doing a lot of 3 cards. The way that I do a 3 card, I split. So you also already have a bit of that also shuffling by the way that I pull those 3 cards. Let's just show you. Sorry, I've got other stuff on my table. So for example, here are 3 of the uncut. I know I've got messy table because I'm just doing cutting kind of things at the moment. And then here are the 3, what it would look like where it's condensed down a little bit without the borders. Again, I'm actually a fan of the borders. I just needed to get it to be more manageable for myself, and so I believe this accomplishes that for me. So now what I need to do is go and do the corners. I'm going to do them at the smallest. I use the Katamaro Pro. I love this. And I'm going to use the smallest one because you'll see that this deck has actually got a nice small corner to it. So I'm going to do that. Let me just show you. So we have that there. And then I'm going to blacken the edges with a Sharpie permanent marker. So I'm going to do that, and then I will be back. Okay, so you can see they are now all corner round. My hand hurts. But next up is blacking the sides. Now again, I liked a lot the gold gilding look of it. I think it popped beautifully on this, and so there's nothing against for me the gold gilding, but I actually am really excited to have it black. I think it's going to make it even more beautiful and shadowed and earthy and wonderful. So I'm actually looking forward to seeing how it will look with it in black. I guess I should show with black, I like these Sharpie Magnums, these big chunky Sharpie markers with a big chisel tip. That's what I like to do. Now everybody's going to be different. You always want to point the marker at the back of the deck. Tip by my friend Icy. On this one, I am actually not trying to avoid a black line on the front because I think that actually will look really nice. You'll see that, I'll try to do a couple here, but you'll see that especially with a lighter card. Now, some people have issues with Sharpie markers because it leaks off on their hands. I have never had that problem. Now, everybody has a different chemical or pH balance or whatever going on in their hands. Now, of course, as I'm doing it, I will get black on my hands, but once these are done and dried thoroughly, I don't ever get transfer onto my hands. So again, I always, you know, I highly recommend testing things. Get yourself a cheap deck of playing cards, trim them, put the black marker on them, and test it out, right? And you know, make sure something that works for me is not going to work for you all. And different kinds of marker react differently to different kinds of paper. Now, this deck is great because it has some extra cards in it, so I was able to test out trimming it as well as putting the marker on the edge before touching the actual tarot cards. Not all decks are like that. You usually have at least one extra card, especially in indie decks, but it's not always the case. But always check, you know, if you can test, because decks, especially indie decks, are not cheap. And again, what works for me may not be ideal for you and your skin composition and all of that. So as you can, I don't know if you're going to be able to tell, but it does put, let me find a light card. It does put a bit of a border, and you can avoid that to some degree. Looks like I forgot a card. So after I do a few, I always kind of stick them together and see, all right, did I miss a major chunk like this one? I might have, nope. Sometimes the corners will have little dings. So I just go back and check that. But you can see, I think, on the strength card, it creates a little bit of a border, and I actually like that. In most decks that I'm blacking, I'm perfectly happy with that to be there. It gives it a little bit of a finished look, or some of that black border back, which I actually, again, liked on this deck. But you can be more careful to lean towards the back and away from the front, and you can get that quite minimal. I'm sure some people can completely get that to not show. But in this case, and in many of the cases when I'm blacking decks, I actually like that, and so I don't worry about it. I just kind of put it flat on and let that come about as it may. Okay, so I'm all finished. I absolutely love the way this has turned out. I love the black edges that just look really great when they're partially fanned out. Again, I was a fan of the gold edges as well, but you know, this feels very me and very wonderful, and I'm really pleased with it. I feel like the deck feels wonderful and shuffles overhand really well. It's just that much easier to get a nice grip on the side. It's still a little bit difficult to riffle shuffle, which I know a lot of people don't riffle shuffle anyways. I see a couple little spots I need to fix, but I can do it. But I think with this deck, I will probably be mostly overhand shuffling, because now that is actually quite comfortable to do so. And so that's probably how I will go about shuffling this deck. So let's just see what we see. I'm just curious. This is a big deck, so my guess is the answer is no, but yeah, I don't think so. But let's just see if I could actually get... I could. Some of it would be cut off, but I think you would be able to see what the cards were. I was just curious if I could get one of this is my large tarot, would be my version of a Celtic cross, so to speak. How I do a large tarot reading. So I can get it on there. I would definitely have to at least talk through this one, but then the person obviously gets an image of their cards as well. So there we have it. Again, I'm quite happy with how it turned out. I see I got a little bit, because I stacked it, a little on here, but that's because these are laminated, that's pretty easy to get off, and it tends to wear off on its own anyways. So there we go. Hope that you've enjoyed this. Again, as I said at the beginning, yeah, see, you can look when you put them together, you'll see like little white spots where you've just not quite gone all the way around. It's usually on the corners, and so I'll just kind of, you know, part way through, and then also at the end, I will do that. It's not the best idea in the world to try to fix it with the deck all together. It doesn't actually work as well that way, so you do kind of want to pull those cards out. Now sometimes if there's a couple close together, I can do it, but you want to tend, because you don't get it nice and flat on, and so it doesn't always fix the problem when you try to get it into the clump of cards. So I always try, you know, take a little of the extra time to pull them out. So here we go. Now these arc, I'm going to try to do it if you kind of get the very tip. Yeah, so sometimes you can do it and sometimes you can't. It depends on the card stock. It depends on different things. So nice thing is you can always go back and clean up and refresh it when it starts to get a little bit dull. Again, yes, my hands are filthy because I just did this. For me personally, once this is all dried, I don't get anything on my hands from shuffling, and so with Sharpie marker. Other people have said otherwise, so please, again, test carefully. Do everything slowly and carefully if you're going to do these things. It's really easy to get into a rhythm, especially with a deck like this, that everything isn't exactly the same. It's easy to all of a sudden then slice something and you've all of a sudden made one card way smaller. So I took a lot of time to double check what I was doing, because I have done that in the past, which is okay, not okay, but it's not the greatest on a deck that is, say, you know, a mass market $15, $16 deck versus a indie deck that costs a bit more, and the shipping would be a lot more to replace it. So, you know, you always want to, so as I said, this isn't, in my opinion, this isn't the best deck to start your project of your first time ever trimming with, but I'm really pleased with the results. I hope you've enjoyed this and have a wonderful night.